I'm Kat from the Whack Recipe team, coming in live from Brooklyn. Today's event is all about sauces. There are so many sauces in the world. We can only talk about three of them today. These three that I've chosen are really very easy to make, perfect for dipping, dolloping on anything, maybe even drizzling over something that you have on your plate. I think they add a lot of fun and flavor to anything, whether you're eating alone, hosting a shindig, doesn't matter. Anytime is a good time for sauce. I will also walk you quickly through how to steam crab from frozen, and I'm gonna bake a really just straightforward, simple filet of salmon. I just want to have some things to eat with the sauce that we're making. So for today's event, I mentioned I picked up three sauces that I hope will give you a good range of options to consider and try for yourself. There are really just so many options on the blog to pick from, but what we're making today is a sweet Cajun butter, a hot honey ranch, and a zesty horseradish sauce. They're all super easy to make, in my opinion. One of them just requires some heating up. Another one involves some very light chopping and very minor cooking. And the third sauce doesn't require any cooking whatsoever. So this is pretty much not hands off, but very, very straightforward. All of the sauces can be served really simply alongside whatever you have on your plate, whether it's crab, whitefish, salmon, maybe even scallops if you want to use a sauce for that. I personally enjoy these three sauces because they don't require a food processor or blender. I don't know about you, but I really don't enjoy cleaning either of those appliances. So I picked sauces that don't require that. All right, let's get started with hot honey ranch. We are going to heat up some oil on the stovetop, and we're going to pour that over this bowl here. It's a mix of spices, fresh herbs, garlic. It looks like there's a lot of red chili flake in here, but that'll sort of mellow out once we pour some hot oil over this. So let me get some oil heated up. I just have some high heat vegetable oil in a pan. Kind of a neutral oil is a good option. And we're gonna get this nice and hot. Medium high heat should be good. This is searing, sizzling hot temperature because what we want to hear is sizzling as soon as the oil hits all this good stuff in here. So what I have in the bowl, I mentioned it's herbs and spices. So I have fresh dill, fresh parsley, minced dried onion. If you don't have minced onion, it's okay. This is sort of like what you'd imagine on like an everything bagel spiced seasoning mix. I think what you could do is just substitute some onion powder, a lesser amount, because this is not going to be as strong as a really pulverized ground up onion powder. But having these nice flakes is really worth getting if you can, because it gives the hot honey ranch a really nice texture. So that's what we're looking at here. While this oil is heating up, probably just going to give this another minute. I do want to get some salmon into the oven. So I just have a single fillet, a fillet of coho. It got kind of destroyed on the way here to the studio, but I'm just going to drizzle some olive oil on this. I've already patted it dry. You always want to pat fish dry when you're putting it into the oven to bake or broil, because that's going to give it a much nicer sheen. It'll get maybe a little caramelized along the surface. If it's soggy, then it's going to steam the fish, which is not what we're really going for when we're broiling or baking or doing anything high heat for that matter. So I've got plenty of olive oil in here, just really, really simple. And maybe I'll season this lightly with some salt, some pepper, and that's it. We're going to have a sauce with this later, so this is going to be the perfect vehicle for the sauce. I'm going to put this in the oven for 6 minutes. And we can check on it at that point. I have a little timer here, so 6 minutes. It might not be done at 6 minutes, but that's okay. We can add another minute or two as needed. The oven is set at 375. That's sort of my go-to temperature for wild salmon. If you go up to 400, it'll still cook, but it's easier to overcook it. And also may end up producing more of this kind of like the milky white stuff, the albumin that can come out of the salmon. So 375 will be better. All right, so you want to be really careful when you have a pot of very hot oil, but this is super hot now. It's just on the point of smoking. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this over. Woo! You want to pour this into a heat-safe bowl and be very careful because, as you can see, it bubbled up, and that's as hot as we want. Very sizzling. It's very aromatic in here now. Smells so good. We're just going to let this cool off before we do anything else to it, because we're going to mix in a few other ingredients to turn this into a nice, creamy, dippable ranch sauce. If you aren't a big fan of spice, well, first of all, this is a hot honey ranch, so it's going to be spicy just by the nature of the recipe itself. However, you can completely omit the red chili flake or even maybe reduce it by half, put in just a pinch. It's still going to be a really delicious ranch. It'll be more of like a honey ranch sauce if you omit the red chili. It's not going to have quite the same sort of spunk, but I think it'll be a really, really good alternative. Also, it depends on the chili flake you have. If you have really fresh, new, super spicy chili, just make sure to cut down on the spice, and you can always spice it up a little more later if you like with some extra hot sauce. But if you have chili that's been sitting in the back of your pantry for a while, it might be less spicy, a little more stale in flavor, and you can do the full amount as is written in the recipe. So that is still going to be too hot for me to add anything to it at the moment. So we'll just leave that there. While that's cooling, what I can do is show you a really quick other sauce. This is most of the ingredients that we're using for the zesty, creamy horseradish sauce. We're not going to cook or do anything with this. The only thing I did was chop some garlic earlier, but we've got horseradish, Cajun seasoning, sweet paprika, spicy brown mustard, some mayo, and then some fresh lemon here. So I'm just going to squeeze that in and eyeball it. And all we're doing is mixing it up. I actually like a recipe like this where I'll just even make a single serving for myself, kind of using the same ingredients and just adding a little bit of this and that, instead of having to make a big batch of this if I know I just want to eat something now and that's it. But I'm doing, in this case, half of the recipe. So that's the horseradish sauce. Creamy, a little bit spicy, just a little bit from the horseradish. I think if you are not a big fan of mayo, what you could do is substitute sour cream, Greek yogurt even would be a really good option for this. But otherwise, this is awesome. It's got a really nice kick to it. It's part of a crab cake recipe that we have up on the blog. But anytime you see a sauce that's attached to a recipe like that, feel free to just steal it and use it for anything else, because I think this would be awesome on rockfish. This is really going to be super tasty to dip little crab pieces in. Just amazing. So that's done. Very anticlimactic, but that's one of the sauces. So let me just look at the timer here. I have about 1.5 minutes till the salmon is done. So let's go back to this oily, sizzling hot mixture. Not so sizzling anymore, which is what we're looking for. So let me add in the remaining ingredients for this. I've got buttermilk. Actually, what I did was I just used regular milk and added lemon juice to it. That's a buttermilk substitute. It thickens it up because I rarely have buttermilk in the kitchen, and when I do have it in the kitchen, I don't end up using it. But milk I usually use. So that's buttermilk / milk with lemon. We've got mayo, and I have one of the key ingredients, honey. So there's a lot of good looking stuff in here. I think it just looks beautiful like this, like an art project. And then we're just going to mix that together. Just give it a whisk till everything's combined. And this is like a very drizzly ranch, like kind of like the texture of ranch dressing. But this is something that you can totally dip as like a very messy dip for crab. I would even drizzle this over vegetables. So let me just give this a taste. Sweet, spicy, not too spicy for me personally, but if you don't like spice, I definitely would say omit most of it, if not all of it. If you are okay with spice, this is perfect. You're going to take a bite and be like, whoo, that is good. The sweetness helps to balance it out. Plus, if you have something like crab, you're just going to want to like keep going back in for more. So, so good. Little crunchy onion pieces are really doing the work of adding texture to that. So, all right, hot honey ranch, horseradish, creamy horseradish sauce. Let's check on the salmon. It looks like it probably could be done. So I'm just going to guess that the inside part of this is a little bit underdone, but I'm going to let this rest and it should probably finish cooking through as we're chatting here. What I mentioned earlier was this white protein that you'll notice on the fish sometimes, especially when you're baking it. I find that the salmon really ends up producing it. It's just a tasteless, flavorless protein that actually comes out of white fish as well, even something like chicken I've seen it on. It's very normal. You just notice it more when it's on salmon. So you can always scrape it off if you don't like it, or just put a sauce on it. Then you won't even see it. So that looks perfect to me, maybe slightly underdone. We'll just leave it off to the side for it to rest. So we have one more protein to cook and one more sauce. The final sauce is a sweet Cajun butter. So again, a little spicy. I did say that I was offering a wide range of options, but these all have spice to them. So hopefully you're all here for that. But what we're making with the sweet Cajun butter is basically just a jazzed up melted butter. And that is something that I think you will very much enjoy with crab, especially. So what we're going to do first is I have this pot of butter. There's just a tablespoon of butter in here right now, some finely diced onion, and some minced garlic. So these are all measured out already. Now let me put it over here. So let me get this going. We're just going to melt all of that together and very lightly cook the onions and the garlic so that they're soft, sweet, translucent, sort of when they start to become nice and fragrant. While that is melting, let me grab my spoon here. We'll stir this occasionally, but while that is melting, I'm going to show you my setup that I use all the time for when I'm heating up Dungeness crab legs. So Dungeness crab is already cooked. Let me pick the prettiest leg here. Well, I'll pick a claw. So Dungeness crab, there's a claw, very chunky looking crab. Got a little set of legs here. This is already cooked. Of course, you can't eat it frozen. You can't have a crab popsicle, but you could defrost it overnight in the fridge and eat it chilled the next day. What I like to do, and I think what most people do prefer, is having warm, steaming hot Dungeness crab to dip into something. So what I do is I do have a steamer set up, but I find that you don't really need to use a steamer to steam crab. There's just a little bit of water in here, maybe a quarter of an inch, because we're not trying to boil the crab. We just want to steam it. And because these pieces are so chunky, a quarter of an inch shouldn't submerge them. It'll kind of just be, they'll be resting on that steaming water. So let me do this here and get this boiling. As soon as the contents of the pot, as soon as that water starts to turn to vapor, hot steam, then I'll go ahead and put the crab in. You can also defrost the crab overnight in the fridge and then use the very same method. You'll just cut down the time that it takes to heat the crab up. Like I said, it's already cooked. All we're doing right now is trying to get the crab nice and hot, warmed through to your liking. So usually find that 10 minutes is good when the crab is frozen solid. 5 minutes is usually good if it's already ready to go. All right, this butter is just about melted. And the onions are still quite raw, so these need to cook down a little bit more. But what we are going to add to it is very, very simple. I have more butter. Actually, this is half of the recipe that's on the blog. The full recipe calls for a cup of butter. So this is an amount that you would want to make for a party or a get-together where people are just dipping crab generously into the butter. I'm going to make half of it. So butter, lemon, there's some Cajun seasoning, and honey, and that gives it that sweetness. So I'll add a little bit of that to the mixture once that's ready to go. Okay. And this looks like it's steaming hot, so let's see. Some nice steam coming from that. So crab is going to go in. We'll put the lid on and let me just set a timer for 10 minutes here so I don't forget. There we go. The bigger, chunkier pieces may need an extra minute or two. Some of those thinner leggy bits will be ready sooner. So if you're picking out pieces from your bag of crabs and you're just picking out the skinnier pieces, know that you can check on it sooner. If you're picking out really chunky ones, it'll probably require the full 10 minutes to heat through, if that makes sense. Let me go ahead and take this Cajun butter to the next stage. Butter is going in now. More butter. Since I'm doing half, I'm gonna do half a tablespoon or so of lemon juice. Gonna add some hot sauce. I like Frank's Red Hot, but a nice Louisiana style hot sauce would be great too. Like Crystal, I think is the preferred brand. My measuring spoons, I don't know where they are, so I'm just gonna eyeball it. About half a tablespoon or so of this. And honey. More or less than what I meant to add, which is fine. Actually, for all of these sauces, we're not baking, so the proportions aren't science. The proportions are really just to your personal taste. If you add a little more or less of something, it's not going to ruin the sauce that you're making. So that's always a great thing to keep in mind. You can also adjust the sauces any way you like. If you like a lot of garlic, you can add even more garlic than is already in here. All right, so we'll just let this come together. That it almost looks like I'm making like a macaroni and cheese in here. All right, this Cajun butter has come together and it's so thick and creamy in here. It looks amazing. I'm gonna transfer this to a bowl somewhere. Let me grab one of these little metal bowls. This is not the bowl I was hoping to grab, but it's the closest one. So I'm just gonna transfer this into this giant, not very pretty metal bowl where it'll cool off, I guess. Once that cools a little bit, I'll just give it a taste and see if we need to adjust it for seasoning. Maybe a little salt, a little pepper, just to give it some balance. But it's going to be really tasty. It smells so good. Butter, hot sauce, yum. It's almost like a buffalo sauce more than a Cajun aroma in here. So the crab is definitely not done yet, especially those bigger pieces, but we have a minute left. So I think what I can do is take out some of the smaller leggy bits. And we can just let these cool on the plate here. I'll leave that one in. This one, this one, and this one. And I'll just let these finish off the heat. Ooh, that is nice and steamy. You can see that. That is not AI, folks. That is real hot crab. So let's start with the salmon here. I think that the salmon would be good with especially the horseradish sauce. So let's take a bite with this. Perfectly flaky. Look at that. That is like the epitome of baked salmon. It just popped right off the fillet there and super, super tender. All right, let me do a little dollop right on top. I wasn't expecting anything less than delicious for that. Salmon and horseradish and like the creaminess of horseradish just goes really, really nicely together. So yum. The other one that I'm really, really interested in trying with the salmon is the hot honey ranch. So for a sauce like this, it got a little bit thicker as it cooled, but it's still a nice drizzly texture. I have alongside the salmon some sweet potatoes. These are like Japanese white sweet potatoes. They're super sugary. I think these are going to be awesome with the hot honey ranch. So I'm just going to do this. And this will be my lunch after we're done here. This is a sauce that you can pretty much serve on anything you can imagine. Like I said, vegetables, like sweet potatoes, I think would be perfect for a hot honey ranch. Maybe even, I don't know, what did I make last week? Brussels sprouts potentially could be really good with this. So the sweetness of the ranch really brings out the sweetness of the salmon. Really, really just a good combination. unexpected. You wouldn't think to put ranch dressing, that bottled stuff, on salmon, but when you're making this particular sauce from scratch, really awesome. So that and the sweet potato, I think it's going to be a good combo. Yum. Yummy and spicy. All right, so those are two of the things we just made. And for the crab, it's one of my favorite proteins to keep in the freezer because all you have to do is heat it up from frozen, just like I just did. And then I end up picking out the meat and putting it into something like pastas, risottos. I'll make noodle dishes with this, kind of like a homemade ramen. There's our platter of crab. Hot butter, if you wanted to serve this with a couple wedges of lemon on the side, make it look pretty. That's a full half lemon, not wedges, but that would be really welcome at any sort of feast, appetizer gathering. You would need more crab than that for sure, because this would go so fast. So let's crack into one of these and try dipping it into the butter. My favorite section is this one, because it's just so chunky. I don't know. Is it normal to have a favorite section of crab? Probably, right? So this, I'm just gonna dip right in here. I'm eating this alone, so double dipping is allowed. Oh my God, amazing. I actually haven't tried the crab with the Cajun butter yet, but that is so much more interesting than plain melted butter. It's got so much flavor and really, actually, it's not very spicy at all. It just has a nice sort of balance to it. Pairs perfectly with the crab. All right. Well, I'm not going to see you next week if you are around because we're taking next Wednesday afternoon off for the holiday. I hope, though, to see you the first week of December. I'll be making a fish stew. So 'tis the season for stew. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for coming. Happy Wednesday. Live wild, everyone.